human, like all of us, has a pretty complicated family situation. Separated from his parents as a baby and raised by a family of yellow dogs, most of his young adult life is spent looking for answers about where he came from and where he might be going as a person. Finn's history is spread out over all 10 seasons of Adventure Time, but today I'm going to break down each of his family members to paint a better picture of who Finn is as a whole, past, present, and future. I'm Whitney Van Laningham, and this is Finn the Human's Family Tree. Before we get started, I want to give a shout out to our super nerd sponsors of the day, Axel and Aries, for supporting us on Patreon. Finn's human parents are Martin Mertens and Minerva Campbell, a con artist and helper from Founders Island. Martin pretends to help people who want to get past the island guardian and escape, but tricks them into getting caught by the Seekers. One day, an old widow asks him to help her leave the island, and although he tries to swindle them, they force him down to the beach. Before they're able to leave, Kara and the other Seekers catch them, breaking Martin's legs in the process. He's sent to the hospital along with the others to recover, where he meets Minerva, the helper in charge of nursing him back to health and keep him from running away. Although he can't charm her into letting him out of the hospital at first, he does convince her to let him take her to dinner, and they end up falling in love. Minerva is clever enough to match Martin's smarts and charm, and although he's a con artist and she's a hardworking doctor, the two are perfect together. Martin changes his act as soon as he and Minerva get together. He gets a job as a barber and supports her while she continues to work as a helper. After Finn is born, he stays at home with his son while Minerva is at the hospital, and honestly seems to be a really amazing dad. He clearly loves his wife and son, and loves spending time with Finn while Minerva is working. But sadly, after only a few months of living life as a happy little family together, the widow comes back for her revenge on Martin for letting them get caught by the Seekers. He manages to escape into the water on a life raft with baby Finn, but the island guardian mistakes his attempt to flee the widow for an attempt to leave the island. In order to save both of them from the island guardian, Martin leaves Finn on the raft and messes up the guardian's programming. Finn floats to safety, but we'll get back to him later. The tragedy is that Martin is flung into the sea by the guardian, and we can only presume that he suffered memory loss that prevented him from returning to his wife and child. We don't know much about the last 6 years of Martin's life after he was separated from his family, but somehow he ended up trapped in the extremely hard to enter, nearly impossible to escape Crystal Citadel. The Citadel is a giant maximum security prison reserved for perpetrators of cosmic crime, including mass genocide, planetary destruction, or killing a wishmaster. So whatever Martin did to end up there was pretty horrific. Knowing that his current a-hole personality is likely due to the multiple head injuries he suffered in succession make it easier to sympathize with him. But at this point, Finn is basically visiting his father, an intergalactic warlord, in jail. Of course, Finn is hoping and expecting that his dad will be the kind of father he's been missing. Someone to tell him about his past and where he came from, and maybe even someone to go on adventures with. Instead, Martin is a heartbreaking disappointment. He's the kind of dad who tells you he's going out for a carton of milk and never comes home. Although Finn literally breaks him out of cosmic prison, repairs his damaged leg, saves his life from the Guardians, and asks him to help him understand who he is, Martin just bails on his son. His ambivalence and lack of self-awareness is a cruel slap in the face to Finn, who has always imagined that his dad left him behind for noble reasons. But when he asks Martin why he left, his dad shrugs and tells him that he can't really remember why, and that it was a long time ago, and that Finn should get over it. Finn has wanted to meet his dad his whole life, and his dad just turns out to be a selfish jerk. As Martin blasts off in a spaceship full of criminals to get away from his son, Finn's arm turns to grass and breaks off, leaving half of his appendage amputated. Finn returns to Ooo, but Martin continues to travel on through space, getting by on his trickster ways and charisma. At one point, he's living with a civilization of koala bear people, who he's tricked into believing that he'll bring them food and medical assistance. In reality, he steals their moth, their only source of food and transportation, to sell for personal gain. He takes one of the koala people with him, naming him Martin II and treating him like the second son he never had all day. He speaks to Martin II the way that he would speak to Finn if he ever spent any time with him. Before abandoning Martin II, he explains to him that he has to take drastic action if he wants to save his life, which hints that maybe some part of Martin very deep down still remembers what happened the day he lost Finn. Part of him knows that he had to leave his son to save him, even though he doesn't remember how much he loved his family and at one time he wanted nothing more than to stay with them. Martin steals the moth back and flies into space with his newly acquired riches. He can't really control the moth, so it seems like his plan is to just float until he finds a landing spot. But the universe has other plans. When the Orgolorg threatens to use the comet to destroy planets, Finn and Jake follow him into space. Finn gets separated and finds himself floating alone in the vast expanse of space. He sets his intentions to being rescued and sings a meditative song that the universe responds to. Martin and the moth float right by Finn's path, and Finn calls out to his dad to help him. As always, Martin tells Finn that it's out of his hands and that the moth is just flying random style. When Finn protests, he takes off his underwear and tells Finn to grab a hold of it so that he can pull him in. Okay, can we pause for just a second? Those aren't boxers or briefs. That's a jockstrap, meaning that at least part of that was directly in his butt crack. Gross. Maybe find something less up your butt to save your kid. I don't know. Finn tries to explain to his dad that he manifested their space intersection by asking the universe to save him. But Martin tells him that there's no greater meaning and that there's nothing out there but emptiness. Just then, the moth finally starts responding to something, the light of the comet, and begins pulling Finn towards where he needs to go. Finn refuses to believe that there's nothing he can do in the face of danger, and decides to attack the Orgolorg, despite his dad telling him that anything he tries is futile. He defeats the Orgolorg and the comet explodes and begins speaking to him. It offers him a choice. He can either go back to his meat reality, or the comet can give him a new mode of existence. Finn decides to go back to Earth where his home and his friends are, but Martin decides to take the comet's deal. Finn confronts him about abandoning him again, and asks him why he always runs away from everything. Martin explains that when you burn enough bridges, the only way to move is forward, which Finn accepts. He realizes that there's nothing he can do to change his father, and that he needs to let him continue to be himself, even if it hurts him. Martin and the comet discorporate, seemingly off to the next plane of the multiverse. I don't think he actually dies, but I do think that his soul is transferred to another part of the astral plane. Maybe he has a new body, or maybe he doesn't have a body at all anymore. That's the last we see of him during the series until the BMO episode of Distant Lands. There, we see a flashback of Finn's dad as Mr. M, a guy in a full spacesuit with a frequency emitter in his helmet that moves when he talks. He's the assistant to a space villain named Hugo, who's intent on abandoning the planet and all of its citizens as it becomes uninhabitable. Of course, the people who live on that planet and even work for Mr. M and Hugo believe that everyone will be taken off-world before the planets collapse. They've identified useful components within each pod of the planet without anyone knowing, and are stealing them to make sure that the drift fails. When BMO agrees to steal a crystal from one of the pods, thinking that it will help save the drift, Mr. M traps BMO inside. This kind of callous behavior is exactly how he treats Finn. Before he can get on Hugo's Unity pod to evacuate the drift, one of the drift's inhabitants, Y5, reveals Mr. M's exceptionally cruel plan. Desperate to save himself before everyone starts an uprising, Hugo locks himself inside the ship and makes it impossible to shut down the network, leaving Mr. M outside. Mr. M manages to hop on the outside of the ship, but when BMO and the lard babies unplug it, it blasts through the planet's atmosphere into space, dislodging him. As he floats away into outer space, he says his catchphrase, "Here comes the rascal." Martin has done a lot of planet hopping in his day, and even when everything goes wrong, he somehow still manages to survive. I wonder if we'll hear from him again in Together Again, the Finn and Jake-centric episode, or whether we're meant to accept that he's gone like Finn has. Let's jump back a minute to talk about Finn's mom. Like I said earlier, she last saw Finn before he and Martin disappeared when he was only a baby. She spent years of her life believing that her husband had done what all hiders try to do, flee Founders Island. Despite telling the Seekers what happened and having them search beyond the Guardians to find them, they never find Finn. We know that he was swept away and washed up on the shores of Ooo, where he was raised by Joshua and Margaret the dogs alongside his adoptive brothers Jake and Jermaine. But Minerva stayed on Founders Island all those years, working as a helper alongside scientist Dr. Gross. Because she's so distraught over losing her husband and son, her work begins to suffer, and she fails to notice that Dr. Gross's experiments have caused a deadly virus. The virus infects and wipes out most of the human population on the island. Because helpers are in constant contact with sick people, every single one of them eventually died, leaving Minerva as the last helper on the island. She realized that it was up to her to save her people from total extinction, so she sacrifices herself and uploads her consciousness to the island's mainframe. From there, She's able to transmit her mind into hundreds of robot helpers to take care of the surviving sick people. Although her body is dead, her mind is very much alive inside the computer system. When Finn arrives on Founder's Island looking for her, he runs into her robot counterparts, who take him back to the lab to run tests on him and Jake. When she tests his blood, her system tells her that the kid standing in front of her is her long-lost son, Finn. Robot Minerva races back to the computer with Finn and Jake in tow so that Finn can meet his mom for the first time. She tells him the story of what happened to her and instructs her robot to hug him on her behalf. Finn is incredibly proud of his mom, and he and Jake burst into tears after hearing how she selflessly gave her life to save all of those humans. Unlike Martin, she is nurturing, compassionate, and cares more about the greater good of humanity than her own personal survival. Without Finn and Martin, I think she felt like she didn't have much to live for, but her rebirth in the mainframe gave her a new purpose in life. With Finn finally back in her arms, sort of, she doesn't ever want him to leave the island. Although most everyone on Founder's Island, except the hiders, believe that leaving the island means certain death, it seems like Minerva has become even more of a zealot about it in her family's absence. She's spent a decade and a half thinking about all of the horrible things that could have befallen her son on the outside world, and she believes more than ever that it's imperative to one's survival to remain on the island. When Finn convinces everyone to leave, Minerva decides that the only way to protect her people is to upload their consciousness into the mainframe too. She cheerily tells them to say goodbye to their meat suits and begins the process to turn all of them into robots. Luckily, Finn manages to stop her in time. He shows her all the people he's helped back in Oo, and all the adventures he's been on to protect the people he loves. Minerva realizes that her son grew up to be a helper in his own way, and that if the outside world led him to this, it can't be all bad. She agrees to help him leave the island after they hang out for a few days. With her blessing, Finn sails back to Oo, finally with some comfort in knowing more about where he came from. That's it for Finn's biological parents. If you want to know more about his dog fam, you can check out my other video all about Jake the dog's family tree. Despite being a child adventurer, Finn has actually been married a couple of times. In alternate realities, of course. In the episode Food Chain, Finn and Jake are transformed into birds by Magic Man and forced to experience the food cycle by becoming a part of the food cycle themselves. During their caterpillar phase, Finn meets and falls in love with Erin, a fellow caterpillar who faints in his arms from dehydration. They rescue her with an oasis, and she and Finn decide to get married. Unfortunately, during their wedding, birds attack them. Finn promises to find her and marry her again when they both return to the caterpillar phases of the food chain, but she tells them that when they're bacteria, she wants to see other people. Thankfully, Magic Man snaps Finn and Jake back to reality, which I guess nullifies the marriage, like when you're blacked out in Las Vegas and the divorce court judge dressed as an Elvis impersonator doesn't want to deal with you. Finn also gets married in the episode Pahoy, this time after getting trapped in Pillow World for an entire lifetime. After slaying a pillow dragon, Quilton, the ruler of Pillow World, offers to throw Finn a party in celebration of his heroic act. At the dance, he meets Rosalinen, and although he's still dating Flame Princess back home, he agrees to dance with her. When he asks Quilton to help him find his way back home, Quilton tells him that he doesn't know what he's talking about, but that he'll help him figure it out. Apparently, they don't figure it out for quite some time, because the next scene that flashes forward takes place after Finn and Rosalinen have gotten married and had children of their own. Their kids' names are Jay and Bonnie, obviously after his best buds, Jake the dog and Bonnabelle Bubblegum. When they're still quite young, Finn's now father-in-law Quilton tells him that he read the Pillownomicon, and it told him that the door leading back to Oo shows up periodically in mysterious places. Finn, Rosalinen, Jay, and Bonnie search for Rashida the Oracle, seeking answers about the Wandering Door for many years. By the time they reach him in the Abacadabra Mountains, Finn is an older man with an alt-reality wrench for a prosthetic arm, and his children are grown. Rashida plants the idea in his mind that he doesn't really want to leave his wife and kids, so Finn decides to go home and grow old with them in his pillow house. When we see him next, Finn is on his deathbed, surrounded by his pillow family and friends. Jay and Bonnie are both married, and Jay and his wife have a small pillow child, Finn's grandson. When he dies, he DMT trips through a kaleidoscope pillow vacuum, past Galb, through space and time, all the way back to the pillow fort in the treehouse. However, when he emerges from the pile, he completely forgets the entire life he lived in Pillow World. It's honestly really sad, especially because Rosalinen begged him not to forget her when he returned to his own world. On the other hand, maybe we should leave the human-on-pillow relationships for Jay from Big Mouth to tackle. Jay and Bonnie aren't Finn's only offspring, however. To annoy Jake and win an ultimate prank war, Finn creates Nepter, aka the never-ending pie-throwing robot. Nepter is completely loyal to Finn, who he thinks of as his father. Even when Jake and Finn accidentally left him in a shed for over 15 months after a game of hide-and-seek, he still came through for them and built them fireproof battle suits to help them save the Goblin Kingdom. After getting zapped with the Ice King's ice power, Nepter is infused with the particles and begins to see the Ice King as his father too. He's equally loyal and relentlessly helpful and positive to him as he is to Jake and Finn. Under the cursed ice power, Finn accidentally turns Nepter into a regular microwave. He gets really upset about it, even though it was clearly not his fault, revealing that he thinks of Nepter as a son as well. After he returns to normal, he puts the magic eyes inside Nepter, bringing him back to life. Nepter bakes the eyes into a pie, saving the day, and everyone celebrates him. In the series finale, Nepter and Flame Princess start a rap duo together, which they keep going after the Battle of Oo. Finn's other son is Stormo, a candy sphinx human hybrid created by Princess Bubblegum using Finn's DNA. When PB makes a candy replacement for herself for when she dies named Goliad, it turns out that Goliad has mind control powers and can make anyone in the kingdom do whatever she wants. To stop her, Peebles creates Stormo to engage Goliad in psychic battle. Because they are so evenly matched, Stormo has essentially sacrificed his life to protect the Candy Kingdom. Lastly, we have to talk about Grass Finn, aka Fern, Finn's humanoid plant double. When the Finn sword collides with the grass sword during a fight with Bandit Princess, it cracks, causing the Finn inside to disappear from view. The grass demon, a small octopus-like spider creature, enters the sword and begins filling it with grass. He wraps Sword Finn into a grass cocoon, keeping him in there until they discuss both wanting to escape. The grass demon possesses Sword Finn and slowly begins to turn him evil. Fern locks Finn in a dungeon and heads off to live in disguise as Finn in his place. Unfortunately, Finn has to kill him in self-defense. Gumball picks up Fern's grass pieces and puts them back together, transforming him into the Green Knight. He uses the Green Knight as a Trojan horse to enter the Candy Kingdom and begin his takeover attempt. During the Great Gum War, Jake smashes a bottle of nightmare juice over himself, Finn, Fern, PB, and Gumball, transporting them into the unconscious realm to hash out their issues. Fern insists on fighting Finn forever, but Jake finds the vault of their shared trauma and unleashes it on them. Finn convinces him to help him fight their shared trauma, and together they defeat the grass demon holding Sword Finn hostage. Without the grass demon's parasitic relationship to give him a body, Fern begins to disintegrate. Before he goes, he asks Finn to plant him in the remnants of the treehouse. When Shermie and Beth climb the tree far in the distant future, they find that a new Finn sword has grown from Fern's tree. So, in a way, both Finn and Fern live on to adventure another day, long after their physical bodies die. Those are all the members of Finn's family tree, but like I said earlier, if you want to know more about the dog side of his fam, check out my other video on Jake the Dog's family tree. Like and subscribe to Nerdwire, and stay tuned for more Adventure Time videos.